Well, maybe we can talk about anxiety and then connect it to all the other questions.
Does anxiety basically come from everything? Life is anxiety. Nothing runs smooth.
You know, anxiety is an interesting, I think it creates a good set of emotions. And you can't have anxiety if you haven't experienced confusion, if you haven't really been thinking or reflecting or traveling to your past through memories, retrieving some of the experiences and hardships you went through. You know, when you're a child, so much of what you do in your tiny little life is just go with the flow. You don't think. And even if you were to put yourself in a space where a good amount of pain was to come to visit you, your brain hasn't fully developed. You don't really, your memory is not intact just yet. So you forget very, very quickly. All of us have been punished by our parents when we were younger. And 2 seconds or 2 minutes later, your father, your mom would come to you and say, "Would you like some chicken noodle soup?" And it's as if she had never spanked you, you know. And so you just jump on her lap and you guys have a good time. But as you kind of just journey through life and you accumulate more experiences, and most of them, of course, happen to be negative because that's what the world of emotions are. They're mostly negative. About 85, 90% of the emotions that live inside us are negative because just life is tough. And we are limited in information, we are limited in knowledge, we are limited in the way we interpret things. So, one of the ways that I think we are able to remove anxiety from our interior is to make sure that you're never out of your comfort zone, because that's what it is. Anxiety has to do with a good amount of unknown that exists in a space. In other words, the future is unknown. The future has a good many question marks in it. And whenever there are lots of questions and you don't really know if you have the answers, and remember, we are creatures after power. If you don't have power in life, you have no choice but to suffer frustration, agitation, anxiety, so on and so forth. Most of them happen to be negative. And the reason why most of our emotions are negative is because we enter into life having so little power. And what little power you and I do have, life eventually puts us in situations where you feel powerless. And then in the presence of feeling weak and feeling powerless, you have to figure out how you want to put this puzzle together. And, you know, our good friend here is going to have a child soon, hopefully healthy. But he's not having a child at the age of 20 or 30 or 40. He's approaching 50 now. And you lose a lot of abilities in your 50s. You lose emotional energy, you lose physical energy, you lose the ability to be patient, to be forgiving. And when you get to be up in age, the truth is you want people to come to where you are so you can share your experiences with them. It's very difficult at the age of 50 or 60 or 70 to journey to a child's world and be with them 24/7, if not 24/7, maybe 10 out of the 24. But that's even too much. And so initially when you hear the news at the age of 50 or 60 that you're going to be a father or a mother, the news initially is, of course, dreadful, frightening, at the same time inspiring. But when you wait a little and the inspiration goes away, the dust settles, so to speak, you sit back and you say, really? Am I going to start changing diapers at the age of 50? Am I going to go to the park at the age of 50? Am I going to go and talk to these parents that I despise, don't want to be around? Do I really want to engage in small talk for the next 10, 15, 20 years? Do I want to go to parent-teacher conference every week or so? And all of a sudden, you become very doubtful of the stage in which you are and the news that at one point inspired you, but now it frightens you. You don't know whether to celebrate or to walk away from the whole thing. So the first thing you need to, I suppose, understand about anxiety or any emotion that's negative is it signifies our lack of power in regards to the space or the stage we're in. Some of you in a month or 2 or 3 will get married. You have every right to be anxious. You have every right to be frightened. You've been single for 20, 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden you want to be in a relationship where you have to submit, surrender, compromise. And your companion, whatever he or she has hidden from you, will eventually have to unpack, either forcefully or they will volunteer the information, and then you have to figure out what the hell you want to do with the things you thought you knew, but you realize you don't. And it's a good way, I think, to approach any event in life, that you need to approach it with a good amount of respect, that all these YouTube video gurus who come on TV and tell us that we should not be afraid, we should not be anxious, we should not be frightened, we should not be this, we should not be that we should always be optimistic and positive. I think they lack a good amount of respect for their audience. They also have lack a good amount of respect for life. The truth is, life is scary. Because if you don't play your pieces the right way, it will crush all of us. That's what life is. And to always just be positive, it's just kind of putting your head in the ground and saying nothing but goodness out there exists. So, anxiety is always about the future. Anxiety is about your relationship to the future and how little you know about how the future is going to unfold. And you need to understand why greed comes about, why habits come about, why assimilation and conformity come about. When you have a habit, it means that you know that on Mondays and Wednesdays you come to Laney College at 9:30, you leave at about 11 o'clock, then you go home, you have some lunch, you take a nap, you wake up, you clean the house, you go for a walk, then you go to a bar, you drink, you chit-chat with some of your friends, you come home, you watch a movie, and then you pass out. That is a good life. It's a life that is predictable. There is going to be little to no confusion about it. No agitation, frustration about it. There is no reason to be angry unless, as Kevin rightly suggested, he plans to come here as expected. There is a note on the door that says, Amir Sabzavari is dead. We'll find a replacement, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. Now remember, when Kevin gets up in the morning, he says, yes, I'm going to shower my daughter, dress her, walk her to school, get on the bus or the car or the bike or walk to school, sit in a class for an hour and a half. That is the plan. The future has been mapped out by him. And the future creates comfortability. You know exactly how things are going to unfold. There are no surprises out there, at least not of your own making. And you trust that your day is going to go smoothly. You have faith in it. You are religious by nature. You have trust and you have faith. But it's rare for life to leave any of us alone. It's filled with surprises. And so we try to accumulate and amass as much power as we possibly can. Physical power. Remember when the pandemic came down here fully blown. What happened was that all of us went to Costco and bought buckets of shampoos and toilet papers and waters because we thought that nothing is going to be around anymore. So one of the reasons why we have greed, one of the reasons why we lust after things, especially power, is because we want to remove any unpleasant surprises that may come into our lives. It's important. Power. Without power, you can't do much. Now, there are going to be some physical surprises, which means that at any time your landlord can come and evict you. So what does society do to protect us from frustration, agitation, confusion, anger? You sign a 1-year lease that the rent is going to be $13.50. There are no surprises. Then we have the emotional world. Remember what Jesus says in the Gospels? Very, very, very true, and you don't need to be spiritual for this. You and I don't live by bread alone. Just because you have a house and that house covers your body, it doesn't mean that it also covers your emotions. It is true that it's freezing outside. You will have emotions that are unpleasant. If you want to remove the emotions, all you have to do is find shelter. Place your body in that shelter. Hopefully that shelter will create a good amount of warmth inside you. And then the negative emotion will go away. Agitation will go away. Frustration will go away. And then you'll realize something. My agitation, frustration, anger, hatred, and even violence has to do with the fact that I don't have a roof over my head. How do you remove all those negative emotions? You get a job. You find a place. You sign a lease. And from that point on, at least for 1 single year, you will never be agitated by and through your body not having shelter to protect it. But there is, as JC says rightly, that none of us in this class live by bread alone. You do have a house, and you have turned it into a home. The only problem is you're alone. You're single. You have, or you need, emotional nourishment. There's a good amount of unknown in that world. Where do I go to find a companion? And should I find someone who is physically attractive? Are they emotionally mature? Are they intellectually mature? Will they give me what I really want? But then the question is, what exactly is it that I really want? And since all of us are moving from one stage to the next without knowing when or how or who, every new stage that you and I enter into, there's a good amount of unknowns. You are going to be agitated. You are going to be frustrated. Now, there are teachings out there, the Stoics, the spirituals, people like Jordan Peterson, people like Eckhart Tolle, people like Sadhguru, people like Plato. And what all these people have in common is that they occupy a stage. They don't have lives like us. They're invited to go on a stage, and every time someone like Peterson goes on a stage, he gets about $30,000 to $50,000. He doesn't need to worry about money. There are no conflicts, at least not as many, with his wife. He's always giving talks. He's always traveling. And just in case he is home with his wife, he's on his computer giving talks on Zoom. And his wife once in a while comes in and says, honey, here's your tea. And when he's on the stage, say in Canada or America, his wife is sitting next to him, reading questions to him that come from the audience. Jordan Peterson, Eckhart Tolle, they're not going to suffer too many changes in their lives unless they all of a sudden get the news that they have cancer stage 4. Then they're going to say to themselves, Jesus Christ, all these years, all this talk for what? For who? Now, as you realize that you have this emotional poverty, let's just say you want a companion because you're alone, you go out because your intellect comes down and says, okay, well, go to a coffee shop, go to the church, go to a certain dating app and see if you can find someone out there. And you do. But you're not a pro in dating, you know. It's not like you've been practicing like Roger Federer or Mike Tyson, you know, or Tiger Woods every day on the court, perfecting your game. You're new to all this business of dating. So what happens? You're lonely. All of a sudden, someone pays attention to you. Loneliness goes away. Give it about 2 minutes or 2 weeks. Love appears, and you think now you're being nourished. All of a sudden, you find some hiccups in the relationship, or you find some wrinkles in the relationship. Your intellect comes down to kind of figure out what the hell is going on, but you can't. Now you have restlessness. Now you can't sleep. Now you begin to be bombarded with questions. Now you're agitated, frustrated, angry. And then by the time you realize 2 years have passed, you realize it's a mistake. You need to get out. More agitation, more frustration. So now you realize emotionally you're unstable. Intellectually you're incompetent because you keep choosing and going after the wrong people. Now, if you don't want to suffer from any frustration, any anxiety, there is a way out. But that way out is not for us. We are people of the world. The way out is the following. Have no expectations from anyone or anything. And when you don't have expectation, it means you can't claim ownership to anything. You have to wing it, moment to moment. There is this great story that comes from the Zen tradition. It's about this young monk who lives in this tiny village. In this village lives a family who has this very, very attractive daughter. And one day this young woman goes out late at night to meet this young boy that she had just met. And you know, young people in the Garden of Eden, there is this apple tree or tree, forbidden fruit. And so they go somewhere very dark, very quiet, and they have sex. Few weeks pass by and the young woman comes to realize that she has missed her cycle. Then the parents begin to notice some changes in her physical appearance. And the mom asks, "What's going on with you?" And she says, "I'm pregnant." We're not talking about the 20th century where such things are okay. We're talking about 2,000, 3,000 years ago. You can't have sex before marriage. You certainly can't get pregnant if you don't have a husband. And so they ask her who the man is so they can crucify him. And not wanting to harm her boyfriend, who later will eventually be her husband, she points to the monk. She says, "That monk, he did it to me." And they go and punish this monk, and in addition to the physical punishment, they say, when the child is born, this is your child, and you're going to take care of it. This young monk looks at the parents and the young woman, even though he had no hand in any of this, he looks at them and says, "Okay, if that's what you want to do, I'm fine." So this monk who had taken a vow of celibacy is now a father, takes care of this kid. Years pass. And the young woman is no longer young. She's in her late 30s or 40s. She looks at her parents and his parents and says to them, "You know, the truth is, the monk didn't have sex with me. It's my current husband who used to be my boyfriend. He had sex with me. That kid was our son." The parents are filled with remorse, guilt, and shame. They go to the monk and they say, "We are very sorry to have troubled you. Our daughter told us the truth. There's a reason why we hide things. Our daughter told us the truth. And we would like our grandson, her son, back." And the monk simply looks at the parents, the husband, the daughter, and says, "Oh, okay, well, here it is. You easily receive and you easily give." Do you know how difficult it is for someone to come and tell you that you have done A, B, C, D when in fact you haven't, and you keep your mouth shut. You don't retaliate. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the left, and someone doesn't need to slap you physically. They could accuse you of things. And you kind of look at them and say, well, if you had any insights about you, if you had any intelligence about you, you would have never accused me or judged me, since your perspective is always going to be limited. But since you have made a judgment upon me, I'll just say, okay. Time will reveal to you that you are wrong. And when you come to apologize, I'll tell you, no need to apologize. I knew from the very beginning that there'll come a day where you will look me in the eye and you will say, I am sorry. Okay. So what this monk has that most of us don't have is, none of us in this class have taken a vow of celibacy. And you guys know what celibacy means. It doesn't mean that you just don't have physical sex. It means you will have no physical relationship, no emotional relationship, no intellectual relationship, and no spiritual relationship. You're not going to be relating your identity or yourself to anything out there. You will remain a virgin to God, if there is such a thing. And God is an entity that's always inging along. It's always the present moment. You and I have no choice as commoners, ordinary human beings, to create history with things. I have never met Kevin prior to the beginning of the semester. I had no idea who he is. I don't know him from Adam. This is only our 14th week. It means Kevin has missed a couple of weeks of class. I have only seen him in this class no more than maybe 20 times. That's it. And in this short 20-week period, we have cultivated a relationship. All of us in this class have. To the point where he says that if our relationship was negative, I would pray to God every morning when I come to Laney College, see a sign on the door. Amir is sick and dead. That would make me happy. But this relationship is one of positivity. So that if I come to school and see the sign that Amir is sick and dead, I'm going to be pissed. I miss the guy. So we need to understand we are the sort of animals that form relationships. And in every relationship, we have expectations. But here's the thing that you need to know. We're always changing as the world is always changing. There is this beautiful poem by, what's his name? Omar Khayyam. گردون کمری ز عمر فرسوده ماست، دریا شرری ز اشک آلوده ماست، دوزخ اثری ز رنج بیهوده ماست، فردوس دمی ز وقت آسوده ماست. That the wheel of life is always turning and changing and twisting, and it'll force us to change with it. There is no stability, constancy to any one of us in this classroom. I got to campus today about 5, and I like to read the news the first thing I do in the morning. Kevin Costner is divorcing his wife after 18 years. How old is he? He's 125. You would think that at the age of 70-some, you would have enough stability, constancy inside you, that you have been transparent with your companion, where there are nothing hidden, that this stability is going to remain the foundation of your life until you die. Not so. You read the news every day. Things are happening, bad things are happening. And then what exactly is it that we're asking? We don't want to be agitated. We don't want to be frustrated. Things are moving far too fast for any of us to keep up with the forces. So, the only way to remove agitation is not to have a relationship with anything. And when you don't have relationships, you don't have expectations. When you don't have expectations, you care, just not as much. You had emailed me about some of the things that were not available on Canvas. The final day for this class is approaching soon. You certainly want to pass this class. And it's about, I want to make sure that in 2 or 3 weeks' time when I get my grade, it's going to be an A. But there are some missing links. I feel as if my A is in jeopardy. And since you've been raised right and you're civilized, your email was very mature, well written, respectful. And I said, okay, but underneath all that niceties, all that civilized expression, there is this agitation, frustration, fear, anger. What the hell is wrong with this guy? He knows that in 2 weeks' time the semester will be over. He's expecting a 25-page essay, and the links are not available. What is wrong with him? But good for you that, again, you've been civilized and raised well, that despite all the agitations, that you're able to say, okay, well, my future is in jeopardy, but let me talk to him in a nice way first. And that's all it is. All of life is about that. The only thing that one can really hope for in the midst of one's frustration, agitation, because there's so many unknowns, is that before you can express your unpleasant feelings in a nasty, negative way, that people will be respectful enough towards you, towards all of us, really, that when they come to realize that there are some wrinkles in any relationship, they're not going to slit your throat. They're going to sit you down, buy you a cup of coffee, share with you what they're going through, and then the two of you hopefully can create a nice community and engage in communion, and then become communists, where both of you can share equally all the stuff that lives inside you. So, again, whenever any of us in this classroom encounter emotions such as frustration, confusion, agitation, and anger, the first thing you need to understand is someone has robbed you of power. Physical power, emotional power, intellectual power, spiritual power. You know, we don't find very many people, if the Gospels are true, where upon hearing that Jesus has arrived, John the Baptist looks at the disciples and says, Jesus must now become more visible, as I must become more invisible. And eventually he just walks towards his death. Now that's about ego, humility, all of that. That you have come to realize your place in life. You no longer need to be around. You need to give your place to another who's far more competent than you are. So the first thing, again, that you need to understand is whenever you don't have power in a situation, you're going to have emotions you won't like. Now, I appreciate the fact that most of you can sit here and be very patient with my rambling every single Monday and Tuesday. I have no doubt that some of you in this class will have children soon. Right now, of course, all of you assume that you have the patience of Job, that you can handle all the things that you will eventually lose, and you will only say, God gives and God taketh away. But even Job didn't have that much patience or tolerance for nonsense. There came a point, very much like the rest of us in this class, you will say, I want to die. Life is not worth living. I want the earth to open up and swallow me. I hate my mother who carried me in her womb. You're very, very patient. But once you have an infant, once she starts screaming, once you lose sleep, you realize you go to work tired, you come to school tired. Your wife no longer really looks at you the same way. She doesn't really much care for you as much. You're only there for one simple reason: money, shelter, food, clothing. She won't shower as much. She's always irritable. She's always frustrated. And then you have to figure out, what are you going to do with this kid in Oakland? And then it just won't be you whom you're going to hate. You're going to hate society at large. You're going to hate Oakland. And then you would want to move, only to realize that, well, moving to somewhere more decent requires money. And then you're going to hate yourself. the hell did I spend all those years being a tattoo artist? I should have gone to school. I should have got a PhD. I should have done this. And that's how all of life is. At different stages, you find yourself on a different platform with a completely different set of puzzles. But maybe I can share with you a story and then move on from this question to something else. Jesus Christ, Jameson, you really like that.
Trying to get that right.
As always, the story comes from the Sufi tradition. And you don't have to become interested in the tradition. It's as long as you're interested and curious about any tradition, that's good enough. I've had some students over the years who become interested in the Persian language because I share Persian poems with my students sometimes. And they become so enamored that they say, maybe I should just travel to Iran and learn the language and get my degree in, I don't know, Persian art or Persian literature or whatever. You don't need to do any of that stuff. Whatever you want, you can find it close at home. It just requires interest and passion, that's all. So there's a king that governs this particular environment, but he's been sad and depressed for many months. People love him. And they go around the world to find a cure for this man, to find a physician who can come to the palace, look at the king, and maybe give him some medicine to make him happy, to bring laughter to him once again. But nothing works. Finally, some of the advisors in the king's palace hear that there is this old dervish, old monk, who lives in the cemetery. And that's what monks used to do for many centuries. They would just live in the cemeteries. Why? رو به گورستان دمی خاموش نشین آن خموشان سخنگو را ببین. That the wisest people that will be able to teach you lessons, good lessons in life, you will find them in the cemetery. They say nothing, and yet what little they say is very loud. That you too will die. They don't need to say it. The tombstones speak loudly. So these advisors eventually go to the cemetery and find this man. And they tell this old dervish the situation about their king. And the dervish looks at these two young folks and says, I know, on the right hand of your king, right finger, there is a ring that he wears. He's been wearing it since he was 5 years old. Bring that to me. And so they do. And so this old dervish takes a week, and like our good friend here, tattoos something on the stone of this ring. And when it's done, he calls the advisors, they come pick up the ring and give it back to the king. And they assume that the moment this king puts the ring back on, he's going to burst into laughter. Not so. A couple of things about kings: ego and humility. When you're young, you want to devour the world. The world is, as Shakespeare would say, it's a stage, or as Tony Montana would say in Scarface, you want the entire world. You want to devour the whole thing. As you get a little older, if you've seen the the movie Godfather, the final part 3, near the very, very end of the movie, if you haven't watched the movie, just YouTube Godfather Part 1. You'll see the young Al Pacino, the young Godfather. Then you see Part 2, Al Pacino has aged a little. Then you see Part 3, he's now an old man. But near the end of the movie, he's an old man who can no longer walk. He's just sitting, and then he just has a stroke on his chair and dies in a courtyard where there are no trees, wind is blowing, and there is no sign of life anywhere. You're always going to have a huge ego when you're young, and rightly so. You have every right to be egotistical. You're a young man, you have dreams, you have hopes, you have energy, you want to go out there and you want to conquer. You know, you're not living in like some forsaken village in India. You know, you're not living in the 12th century where your parents give you up to a monastery because that's what Abraham did. You sacrificed your son for God. You know, you want to go out there and create meaning and purpose. You have to have ambition. It's beautiful. I was talking to my wife this morning, and she said that she just received an email from a friend of, I don't know, some almost 15, 16 years ago. She went to Laney, this friend of ours. Her name was Abby. This is before you guys. And when I first met her, she came as a guest. She was married. Later, she was divorced. Then, not because of the things I said in class, she was just divorced. And she's finishing up her PhD at Harvard. And she's coming to Oakland in a few weeks, and she was wondering if she could have coffee with my wife. And she said, okay. It's good to be ambitious. No one gets married to end up divorced. A surprise that created a good amount of loneliness and depression for her, probably. She probably imagined that she was never going to get married again. She got married, and now she has a 2-year-old. She never imagined her going to Harvard. She did. It's good to be ambitious. It's not good to be a monk if you don't have the wiring for it. At any event, so the king is old, sitting on his throne and always being sad because he's seen his age or his days go by. He no longer have the energy. His knees hurt, arthritis, you know. And when you sit and when there is nothing out there to distract you, and when you don't want to be distracted, you're pushed into reflection. And whenever you think, whenever you truly, truly think, Jameson, there is always going to be a distance between you and life. You're always going to be standing on the outside looking at life and judging life. And your judgments, for the most part, are going to be unpleasant and negative. That's what reflection does. It creates a space between you and whatever it is you want to engage in. When I first met my teacher when I was a very, very young man, I thought he was God. Without him, my life was sad and dark and gloomy. Every time I went to his house, it was like the Garden of Eden. And though his ideas were always sad, but in his presence, sadness, man, it was transformed into happiness. عشق در دریای غم غمناک نیست. That if you love, sadness will be transformed by love into something joyous. You'll make sadness into poetry, into music. Then years passed by and we would still interact. And then I would sit back and hear him talk. Sometimes I would say, what made me so interested in him? He's so all over the place. He's so uninspiring. That's what happens with time and reflection. So this king, who was very much like Gilgamesh, pushing everyone around and exploiting and exploring, came to a point where he says, I've done all these things, but now what? Life doesn't mean anything. So he has the ring, and he's not reading what's been scribed on the stone. One morning, as he's just sitting there gloomy, he's about to sneeze, and he puts his hand to his mouth, and all of a sudden sees inscription on the stone, which says, "This too shall pass." And all of a sudden he bursts into laughter. And the point of the story is this, I think. And, in language and stories are always going to be layered, and so you have all sorts of interpretations. Mine would be, no moment ever remains the same. Things are always changing. There is no reason for you to keep an emotion and make it into a frozen sea of ice. Let it flow. You're sad right now, be sad. As long as you know that sadness is not going to be around all the time. This too shall pass. So if there are agitations, if there are frustrations, if there are anxieties, the truth is you're going to have them. And there is nothing wrong with having them. You will be nervous, you will be shaking, you want to raise your hand and say a question or say something, but you've never done it before, so you're confused, anxious, dreadful, all that stuff. But what you need to keep in the back of your mind is, this too shall pass. You were once a king. You were in a relationship. You would go home, you knew that lunch would be there, dinner would be there, your companion would be there, watching a movie with a companion would be there. Now that companion is there no more. And you're sad, rightly so. But like before, you will find a companion again, only to lose that companion, if not physically, certainly emotionally. If not emotionally, certainly intellectually. And you may come to be 80 or 90, realize that it's time for you to slowly work on saving your own soul, and your wife can't help you. So, negative emotions or positive emotions, this too shall pass. Yeah. Oh, I'll leave in about 10 minutes, if that's okay. Thank you. Let me, yeah.
I noticed when you said all that, you never said anything about control.
Power gives you...
Power is control.
Yeah, power is control. It's, it's like you go to sleep and the sky is clear. And since you have a daughter, you figure out what you want, what she wants to wear the night before. You put everything on the bed or on the sofa somewhere. And you wake up and to your surprise, it's raining. Now, if shorts and a tank top were the only outfit you had for her, then you'd be angry. But that's not your case. You open the closet and you find some pants, long sleeve shirt, and a jacket, some warm socks, and some rain boots, and you send her out. Because in the presence of a surprise, a rain, you have enough power and enough control to make sure that your daughter remains warm and dry when she steps out. And that's what we do. You're here for one reason. It may be that you like me and I like you too. There is nothing wrong with that. But the truth is, at the end of the day, you're here for one simple reason: control. You want power. You want to get a job that pays you $150,000, not just $45,000. And the more control you have, the more power you have, your daughter will also benefit from it. You'll send her to a private school. Maybe you'll just leave Oakland, somewhere nicer, more decent. Without power, you can't do much. You know. Now, let me quickly, before continuing with that, say a few things about ego. Of course, English is a very incomplete language for philosophy, but because in other languages, in French, for example, you have 3 or 4 different words for love. In Greek, you have 7 or 8 different words for love. In Arabic and Persian, you have 5 or 6 different words for love. In English, it's just love. You know, I love pizza, and I love my country, and I love this, and I love that. But you're a young man now, Jameson, when hopefully you get to our age, the senior citizen in this room, you will have a son or a daughter. Do an experiment when they're about 4 or 5 or 6. Get a chess set and teach your kids how to play chess. And they'll do something really, really interesting. You know, when you're a kid, organically you are competitive. I'm not talking about kids that are just wired to be somewhat docile, calm and relaxed and passive. About 95% of the kids out there, they want to be the best. So when they are running and one falls behind, they will cheat, they will fight, they will throw a temper tantrum. Your kids will do whatever they can to win the game from you. They say, Dad, can you go get me a cup of milk? I'm 1 year away. They will remove some of the pieces. They will remove some of their own pieces in boxes that will eventually checkmate you. Is it because they have a big ego? No. They love to win. There is something about winning that is organic for us. What you have in the socialized world is win, but win by being fair. That's a different story. You hide when you win, but it has come to you in an unfair way. And by winning, I don't mean amassing power or money. You could win emotionally. You can win intellectually. You know, someone may be filled with a tremendous amount of Christian passion, but intellectually they're not very educated. But intellectually you're very educated, but you lack emotions. So what do? Someone comes to you and they in fact had a dream about Jesus Christ. They're walking on air. But what do? Well, because you look at them and they are filled with passion, you say, oh, they're just mentally unstable. And you civilize them with the prowess of your intellect. We do it all the time. It's not that you shouldn't have an ego. You should have a civilized, educated ego. That you go into an environment and you realize that, for example, you have about 5 people in their 80s. And they're all reading the Bible. You, on the other hand, you have been teaching the Bible for the past 20 years. You know the ins and outs. In fact, it was recently revealed that Jesus never existed. You know all that stuff. But you have a couple of choices. You could either look at the 70, 80-year-olds and say, they're stupid, let me educate them. Or you could say, they are old, they are near death, faith, meaning, identity, salvation, soul, God, paradise. It's profoundly meaningful for them. So you tame your ego, you refrain from saying things to them, just to keep them at peace. If you happen to be really, really egotistical in a bad way, it will give them the history of Jesus, the history of Christianity. And then, God forbid, if one of them becomes attracted to your ideas at the age of 80, they will lose their faith. Now, when they're sick and close to death, who are they going to pray to? Have a big ego, just know when to use it. I apologize for today's class. Right.